Hello, everyone. Welcome to our community Bible study for Thursday, January the 28th, 2021. Today, we're going to talk about the faith of Job in our 22nd profile in faith, number 22. The story of Job occupies a complete book in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and a good part of the story raises the question of why does God permit evil to exist in the world? There's really four sections of the book. It's quite a few chapters, but we're going to be able to summarize pretty quickly. First, Job is introduced, who he is. Then we have a interaction of Satan, who challenges God to how well Job has been blessed. And that's when Job's suffering begins. Then beginning in chapter 3, we have Job's response to the tragedy that has happened to him and conversations with three friends of his, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And they have extensive conversations back and forth about how to cope with what has happened to him and his family. And then near the end are two speeches from God to Job and Job's response. And then at the very end, there's just a little paragraph or two about Job's life being restored. So why do we read the book of Job? To me, it's to try to apply some things in our lives that are eternal themes, both for ancient peoples and for us today. The first is the question, why does God permit evil in our world? And the book struggles a little bit with that. Then the second question, I think, is how do faithful people cope with calamity, tragedies, evil, the evidence of those things that are in our world? To me, this is very important, even more so than the intrinsic questions about the presence of evil or why, but what I call the existential, which is how does it affect my existence, our time, my faith, our coping in this world. And then the third application has to do with living with humility, with the mystery of those things that are beyond us. And we will read one of my favorite verses, which is chapter 38, verse 4, and you'll hear it when we get there. So let's begin with learning a little bit about Job. Chapter 1. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. And he owned, listen to this, 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. So Job was wealthy and well-to-do. Verse 4, his sons used to hold feasts in their home on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to come and eat and drink and celebrate. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified, following the Hebrew law. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. So Job was very much the one who wanted to be sure that he could do for his children and provide even for them in case maybe they have done something that was sinful, and he wanted to watch over them and protect them. Now we switch to a heavenly scene. Verse 6. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. Well, of course. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. And the Lord asked Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He's blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Satan replies, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now, stretch out your hand and strike everything he has. He will surely curse you face to face. The Lord said to Satan, very well, then everything he has is in your power. But on the man himself do not lay a finger. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now, this is, if you take this face value, it's very hard for me to swallow that Satan could almost trick God into letting him go and do this to Job. And that from the beginning, God was prideful about, oh, did you see Job? He's my faithful servant. He's blameless, upright. What a good example to the rest of everyone. Well, I think that, for me anyway, it's less important that we try to imagine God and Satan with personalities like you and I. I think, however, it does try to set up the scene for how Job was blessed so much and then how he was cursed. Verse 13. One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were nearby. The Sabaeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. Uh-oh, things are starting. The oxen and the donkeys are gone, and the servants. While he was speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. Sheep are gone. Another group of servants are gone. And then while he was speaking, yet the third messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties. They swept down on your camels, made off with them. They put servants to the sword, and I'm the only one who escaped. Camels are gone. More servants are gone. And then finally 4, the fourth messenger. While he was speaking, the fourth messenger came. Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the older brother house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I'm the only one who escaped to tell you. At this, Job, who clearly loved his children, got up and tore his robe and shaved his head, and he fell to the ground in worship and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. In all of this, Job did not sin by charging God with the wrongdoing. Let's take a break. Job tore his robe, shaved his head in a posture of mourning because he clearly was mourning. And yet, he acknowledges that everything he has comes from God and that it has been taken away. And I still worship the God. I still praise his name. And the point here is also taken in the scripture is that he didn't charge God with doing the wrong, with doing something evil. It was just, this is how it was. And he was accepting that, even though he was grieving deeply. Chapter 2. On another day, back up in heaven, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said, where have you come from? Same response. From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. Then the Lord said to Satan the second time, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He's blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil, and he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. Skin for skin, Satan replied. A man will give all he has for his own life. But now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you face to face. The Lord said to Satan, he's very confident about Job. Well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. Verse 7, so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Oh man, that sounds horrible. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. She had had enough. And he replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? In all of this, Job did not sin in what he said. And then Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamanite, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him. And they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. And they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. You know, it's interesting because Job's friends were from 3 different tribes. That's with so-and-so, the so-and-so. They're from different tribes. They came together. And, you know, from a therapeutic point of view today, from a compassionate point of view, they really did well for their friend. They just sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights and said Shiva. Some of us might understand that. They just said no words, but just witnessed the great suffering of their friend and did not leave him alone. So that's the end of the first 2 chapters. Then chapter 3, things begin to change. After this, a whole week, a morning, Job opened his mouth, and guess what? He cursed the day of his birth. And I'm going to read parts of this to give you an example. It's just too long and too over and over to be able to go over it in our time frame. But it is a pitiful recollection of how he cursed the day of his birth. He said, may the day of my birth perish, and the night that said a boy is conceived, that day may it turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine on it. May gloom and darkness claim it no more. May a cloud settle over it. May blackness overwhelm it. So instead of his day of birth being a celebration, he wished it had never happened. And then he just goes on and on. Why did I not perish at birth and die when I came from the womb? Why were there knees to receive me and breasts to nurse me? For now I would already be lying down in peace. He wishes he were dead because of the suffering that he's enduring today. Well, we go on, and that finishes chapter 3. The last verse, 26, he says, I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil. Oh, he is in pain deeply, deeply. So what happens now are these conversations with his 3 friends. They speak to him, and then he responds. And I'm going to give you a little taste of them. and that's it. The first is Eliphaz, the Temanite. If someone ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? But who can keep from speaking? He's telling Job this. Think how you have instructed many, how you have strengthened feeble hands. Evidently, Job has done a lot for other people. Your words have supported those who stumbled. You have strengthened faltering knees. But now trouble comes to you, and you're discouraged. It strikes you, and you are dismayed. Should not your piety be your confidence, and your blameless ways your hope? Consider now, who being innocent has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? Talks about people plow evil and trouble comes to them. All these things that happen. Can a mortal be more righteous than God? Between dawn and dusk, people are broken to pieces. And he just goes on about how things happen. And then verse 5, Eliphaz, I forgot his name. Eliphaz says, but if I were you, instead of cursing the day you were born, if I were you, I would appeal to God. I would lay my cause before him. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. And he goes on and describes that. Blessed is the one whom God corrects. Ooh, that's hard to receive, but God corrects us and it's a blessing. So do not despise the discipline of the Almighty, for he wounds, but he also binds up. He injures, but his hands also heal. From 6 calamities he will rescue you, and 7 no harm will touch you. You will come to the grave in full vigor, like sheaves gathered in season. We have examined this, and it is true. So hear it and apply it to yourself. He's trying to say, if you're faithful, you trust in God in good times and bad. And Job, listen to the advice that you've given to others that now we're trying to give to you. No one can keep quiet now because you need this help. Well, here's a little bit of Job's reply, and it goes on for 2 full chapters, but we won't go over all of that. Job replies in chapter 6, if only my anguish could be weighed, with like a scale, and all my misery be placed on the scales, it would surely outweigh the sand of the seas. No wonder my words have been impetuous. He feels like the weight of his misery is more than the weight of the sand of the entire world. This is down to 24. Teach me and I'll be quiet. Show me where I've been wrong. How painful are honest words, but what do your arguments prove? I think he's angry at his friend. Do you mean to correct what I say and treat my desperate words as wind? Relent. Do not be unjust. Reconsider, for my integrity is at stake. Is there any wickedness on my lips? In other words, he's saying, do you really think I deserve this? He's angry. And he concludes, therefore, I will not keep silent. I will speak out in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. If you've ever had someone who suffered a great loss, you know that sometimes they have to be able to speak the anger and the sadness and the grief and the why, ask questions why and all of this, because their cries out of pain. And although his friend was trying to help, Job wasn't ready for that, and it didn't do any good. Now, chapter 8 begins with Bildad, who is the second friend. And he goes on much the same fashion. He begins, how long will you say such things? Well, he's going to say them as long as he has to. Your words are a blustering wind. Ooh. Bildad was tired of listening to this. Well, it goes on for a chapter, and then the next chapter 9, Job replies, and it goes on for chapter 9 and 10. So let me read to you about chapter 10. He says, why then did you bring me out of the womb? I wish I had died before any eye saw me. If only I had never come into being, if I had been gone straight from the womb to the grave, then at least he would be at peace now. Well, that's the interaction. All three friends try to speak words to Job that he is not ready to hear. He responds to each of them, and there is anger and bitterness and a deep sense of pain. So we go from chapter 10 all the way to chapter 38. And the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. That reminds me of when God spoke to the Israelites when they escaped from Egypt, and he gave them first verbally an announcement at Mount Sinai of the law, long before Moses got the actual Ten Commandments. And it was stormy, and the description in Exodus is of the ground shaking and the voice of the Lord being so frightening that the people afterwards said to Moses, please never do that again. Always intervene for us. So out of the storm, the power, the awe of the Almighty touching earth, God says, who is this, meaning Job, that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Ooh, how little do you know. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you and you shall answer me. This is the verse, 38, verse 4, that to me I remember over and over again personally as a reminder when I'm caught needing to admit my humble self. God said, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Ooh, I know I wasn't there. Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions, the foundation? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? What were its footings set, or who laid the cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. Who shut up the sea behind its doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place? When I said, this far you may come and go no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt. Job, have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn the place it resides, that it might take the earth by edges and shake the wicked out of it? Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And then he's in 40. The Lord goes on to say, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? In other words, you're going to correct me. Let him who accuses God answer him. So he listens for Job to respond. Who are you to challenge me? This is chapter 40, verse 3. Job answered the Lord. Well, first let me say, Job got the message. I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer now. Twice, but I will say no more. Then the Lord again spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you and you will answer me. Are you going to discredit my justice? Do you have an arm like God's that can do these things? Or can your voice thunder like this? Can you hear that? Well, Job replies, I know, Lord, that you can do all things, and your purpose will not be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without me having the knowledge? Job says, surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You listen, Lord, and I will You said, listen, and I will speak. I will question you. Lord, my ears heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Then the epilogue is what it's called. Chapter 42, verses 7 through 17. After Job prayed for his friends, that's the first thing he did. He prayed for his friends. He knew that they had been there for him, even if their words had not comforted, maybe they had spoken too quickly. The Lord restored the fortunes of Job and gave him twice as much as he had before. All his brothers and sisters and everyone who knew him before came and ate with him in his house. They comforted and consoled him over all the trouble the Lord had brought, and each one gave him a piece of silver and a ring of gold. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the earlier part. And it tells about his sheep and donkeys and camels and oxen. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters to replace the first ones, I guess. Nowhere in all the land were found women as beautiful as Job's daughters. And he granted them an inheritance along with their brothers, which was unheard of. The last 2 verses. After this, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. And so Job died an old man and full of years. Well, that's the end of the book. So just a couple of questions here to think about. The existence of evil, is it really because it's a game between Satan and God and we're the pawns? I don't think so. And yet that sets off the story in a fashion that certainly people of ancient times who personified a lot of the gods and stuff would have understood. Is evil the result of the fall of humanity? That seems to be more of what we read in the scriptures. But more importantly is wherever evil comes and however it happens, our hope is in the redemption of God. And that, I think, is what his friends had a clue about, and he finally came around to. And then what does it mean to be faithful? Is there a limit to our faithfulness? Can we be faithful until we reach the breaking point like Job has? And what is our breaking point? And then I wonder if even we reach the breaking point here in Job's story, God was still there. And Job had a chance to come back out of that deepest place. And I do believe that God can redeem anything, and you can fall to the lowest point of the pit and come back. The other thing is that grief and loss are indeed part of life. And so how do we mourn and bring comfort? And Job's friends showed us some of that and then showed maybe some ways when it didn't work. But I think one of the things we should remember, which is why I like that chapter 38, verse 4, where God challenges Job about where were you when I made the world. If we consider the awesome God of creation, we also consider about how people of faith might respond with humility and a sense of awe and a sense of hope, even when our knowledge of understanding these things are limited and our ability to make sense of it is also limited. And so faith is not always because of knowledge. It may be because of our belief and experience. And when we consider the awesomeness of God in the creation and the universe, and even the things that happen around us that we have no control over, perhaps a dose of humility helps us to see things clearly. Perhaps that's the lesson of Job. God bless you. We'll see you next week.